The wagon wheel hit another rut in the dusty road, and Olivia Lawson gripped the wooden seat harder as her basket of fresh, baked bread nearly toppled over the side. She had been delivering baked goods in Paso Robles, California since she arrived 6 months ago, but this particular morning in July of 1882 felt different, heavier somehow, as if the summer heat carried more than just the weight of the sun. Her small bakery on the edge of town had become known for its delicious pastries and breads, but today she faced a problem that threatened to ruin everything she had built. She was completely out of milk, and the Henderson wedding cake she had promised to deliver tomorrow required at least 2 gallons of fresh cream. The general store had run dry 3 days ago when a shipment wagon overturned crossing the Salinas River, and nobody in town seemed to have extra to spare. Olivia had asked every neighbor, every shopkeeper, and even the priest at the small chapel, but everyone shook their heads with apologetic smiles. The Hendersons were one of the wealthiest families in Paso Robles, and this wedding would either make or break her reputation. She could not afford to fail, not when she had left everything behind in Missouri to start fresh after her father's death left her with nothing but debts and a legacy of broken promises. As her wagon rolled past the last buildings of town, Olivia spotted old Mrs. Chen sitting outside her laundry, hand-washing linens in a large basin. She pulled the reins, and her mare, Daisy, came to a gentle stop. "Mrs. Chen, I do not suppose you have heard of anyone with extra milk," Olivia called out, though she already knew the answer. The elderly woman looked up, her weathered face sympathetic. "You could try the Peterson Ranch, dear. Nathan Peterson has the largest dairy operation in the county. His place is about 5 miles north, just past the oak grove. Cannot miss it, big white fence all around the property." Olivia's heart lifted slightly. She had heard of Nathan Peterson, though she had never met him. Folks in town spoke of him as a serious man who kept to himself, someone who had built his ranch from nothing after the war. Some said he was cold, others said he was simply private, but everyone agreed his dairy cows produced the finest milk in 3 counties. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. I will head there right away." The older woman smiled and returned to her washing. Olivia snapped the reins gently, and Daisy started north along the dirt road that wound through golden hills dotted with oak trees. The landscape here was so different from Missouri, drier and more open, but Olivia had grown to love the way the California sun painted everything in shades of honey and amber. The ride took nearly an hour in the climbing heat. By the time Olivia spotted the white fence Mrs. Chen had mentioned, her dress clung to her back with perspiration, and she had drunk the last of the water from her canteen. The Peterson Ranch stretched across the valley like a small kingdom, with a large barn painted red, several outbuildings, and a sprawling house with a wide porch. Dozens of black and white dairy cows grazed in the fenced pastures, and Olivia could see workers moving between the buildings. She guided Daisy through the open gate and up the long drive. Before she reached the house, a man emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a cloth. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that showed traces of dust and sun. His face was strong and angular, weathered by outdoor work but undeniably handsome in a rugged way. He wore simple work clothes, a plain cotton shirt with sleeves rolled to his elbows, dark trousers, and worn boots. As he approached, Olivia noticed his eyes were a striking blue-gray, the color of storm clouds over distant mountains. "Can I help you, miss?" His voice was deep and measured, neither friendly nor unfriendly, just cautious. Olivia climbed down from the wagon, smoothing her skirts and suddenly aware of how disheveled she must look after the long ride. "I am sorry to arrive unannounced. My name is Olivia Lawson. I run the bakery in town, and I am in desperate need of milk. The general store has been out for days, and I have a very important order to fill. Mrs. Chen suggested I come here. Nathan Peterson studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Up close, Olivia could see the fine lines around his eyes, the kind that came from squinting into the sun for years. He was probably in his late 20s, she guessed, maybe 30 at most. There was something guarded about him, as if he measured every word before speaking. How much milk do you need? 2 gallons if you can spare it. I can pay whatever your usual price is, perhaps a bit more given the circumstances. I also brought fresh bread as a gesture of goodwill. She gestured to the basket still in her wagon. Nathan glanced at the basket, then back at her. 2 gallons is not a problem. We produce far more than we can sell locally. Most of it goes to San Francisco buyers. He paused, and something flickered in his eyes, perhaps curiosity. The bakery on Main Street, that is yours, with the blue shutters. Yes, that is the one. Olivia felt a small surge of pride. I opened 6 months ago. I have smelled your baking when I come to town. The whole street smells like cinnamon and butter. He said it matter-of-factly, but Olivia thought she detected the faintest hint of appreciation in his tone. Thank you. I take pride in my work. She hesitated, then added, I would not have bothered you if it were not truly urgent. The Hendersons are getting married tomorrow, and I promised them a 3-tier cake. Nathan nodded slowly. Wait here. I will get the milk for you. He turned and walked toward the barn, his movements efficient and purposeful. Olivia waited by her wagon, using the time to observe the ranch more carefully. Everything was well maintained and organized, from the neat stacks of hay bales to the carefully mended fences. This was a property owned by someone who cared deeply about his work, someone who took nothing for granted. Several minutes later, Nathan returned carrying 2 large milk cans, their metal surfaces gleaming in the sunlight. He loaded them carefully into her wagon, making sure they were secure and would not tip during the ride back. What do I owe you? Olivia asked, reaching for the small leather purse she kept in her pocket. Nathan straightened, wiping his hands again. $2 for both. Olivia knew this was less than the going rate, but she did not argue. She counted out the coins and pressed them into his calloused palm, noticing how his hands were marked by years of hard work. Thank you, Mr. Peterson. You have saved my business, truly. Nathan is fine. He pocketed the coins, then seemed to struggle with something internally before speaking again. You said you make cinnamon bread. Among other things, yes, cinnamon rolls, actually. They are quite popular. I have not had a proper cinnamon roll in years. The admission seemed to cost him something, as if he did not like revealing personal details. My mother used to make them when I was young. Olivia smiled warmly. Then you must try mine. I insist. Next time you are in town, stop by the bakery. The first batch is on me as thanks for today. Nathan looked at her directly for the first time, really looked at her, and Olivia felt an unexpected flutter in her chest. His eyes held something she had not noticed before, a deep loneliness, a hunger for connection that went beyond food. I might do that, he said quietly. Safe travels back to town, Miss Lawson. Olivia, please. She climbed back onto her wagon, gathering the reins. And thank you again, Nathan. You have no idea what this means to me. She guided Daisy back down the long drive, but when she reached the gate, she could not resist glancing back. Nathan still stood where she had left him, watching her departure with an expression she could not quite decipher. Something in that moment felt significant, like the first crack in a dam that had been holding back water for too long. The ride back to Paso Robles passed quickly, as Olivia's mind raced with thoughts of the Henderson cake and the mysterious rancher who had saved her from disaster. By the time she reached her small bakery, the afternoon sun had begun its descent toward the western hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Her bakery was a modest single-story building with the blue shutters Nathan had mentioned. She had painted them herself when she first arrived, wanting something cheerful to announce her presence in this new town. The front room served as the shop, with a counter and shelves displaying her daily offerings, while the back contained her large oven, work tables, and storage. Upstairs was a tiny apartment where she lived, just a bedroom, sitting area, and small washroom, but it was hers, and that mattered more than size. Olivia unloaded the milk cans, struggling slightly with their weight, and carried them into her storage room where she kept her ingredients cool in a stone-lined cellar. The temperature underground stayed much lower than the summer heat above, a technique she had learned from her father during the few good years when he had been sober and still remembered his trade as a baker. For the rest of the evening, she worked on preparing the components for the Henderson cake. She made the batter for the 3 tiers, each one slightly smaller than the last, and created the buttercream frosting that would hold everything together. The milk Nathan had provided was rich and fresh, far better quality than what she usually bought from the general store. She found herself wondering about him as she worked, about the sadness she had glimpsed in his eyes, about why a successful rancher would live alone in that big house. The next morning, Olivia rose before dawn to assemble and decorate the cake. By the time the sun crested the eastern hills, she had created something beautiful. 3 perfect tiers covered in smooth white frosting and decorated with delicate sugar flowers she had formed by hand. The Henderson daughter, Mary, would be thrilled. She delivered the cake at noon, and as predicted, the Hendersons were overjoyed. Mrs. Henderson pressed an extra $20 into Olivia's hand as a bonus, gushing about how the cake was even more magnificent than she had imagined. Other wedding guests crowded around to see it, and several asked for Olivia's business information, promising to order cakes for their own upcoming celebrations. Walking back to her bakery, Olivia felt the warm glow of success, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Nathan Peterson and his lonely ranch. She wondered if he would actually come by for those cinnamon rolls, or if it had been mere politeness on his part. 3 days passed with no sign of him. Olivia fell back into her regular routine of early mornings and long hours of baking, but she found herself glancing toward the door more often than usual, hoping to see a tall rancher with storm-cloud eyes walk through. On the 4th day, just as she was closing up shop in the late afternoon, the door opened and Nathan stepped inside. He had cleaned up from his work clothes, wearing a pressed shirt and clean trousers, his hair damp as if he had recently bathed. He held his hat in his hands, turning it nervously between his fingers. "I hope I am not too late," he said, glancing around the now empty shop. "I had business in town and remembered your offer." Olivia's heart jumped unexpectedly at the sight of him. "No, not at all. Come in, please." She gestured toward the small table and chairs she kept near the window, where customers could sit and enjoy their purchases. "Sit down, and I will bring you some fresh rolls. I made a batch this morning." She hurried to the back and retrieved a plate of her best cinnamon rolls, still soft and fragrant, drizzled with cream cheese icing. When she returned to the front, Nathan had seated himself by the window, looking somehow out of place among the delicate furnishings, like a wolf trying to fit into a dollhouse. "Here you are." She set the plate before him, along with a cup of coffee she poured from the pot she kept warm throughout the day. "I hope they live up to your mother's recipe." Nathan picked up one of the rolls and took a careful bite. Olivia watched his expression change as he chewed, something softening in his face, a flash of memory and emotion crossing his features. He swallowed and looked up at her with something approaching wonder. "These are remarkable," he said quietly. "Better than I remembered, actually. Thank you." Olivia sat down across from him, pleased by his genuine reaction. "I am glad. It is the least I can do after you saved me with that milk. The Henderson cake was a tremendous success. I received 6 new orders from guests at the wedding. Good. You have talent, it should be recognized." He took another bite, then seemed to wrestle with something before speaking again. "I do not often come to town. The ranch keeps me busy, and I suppose I have grown accustomed to solitude. But these past few days, I found myself thinking about your bakery, about the smell of cinnamon. It reminded me of better times before." He trailed off, looking down at his plate. "Before what?" Olivia asked gently. Nathan was quiet for a long moment, and she thought he might not answer. Then he sighed, setting down his coffee cup. "Before the war. Before my parents died. Before I learned that most people cannot be trusted." He looked up at her, his eyes vulnerable in a way that made her chest tighten. "I apologize. That is too much honesty for a casual conversation. No, please. I understand loss, Nathan. My father died last year, leaving me with nothing but his debts. That is why I came to California, to start over where nobody knew my family's failures." She surprised herself with her own honesty. There was something about this quiet rancher that made her want to share the truth, to connect with someone who seemed to understand disappointment. "What happened to your mother?" Nathan asked. "She died when I was 12. Fever took her one winter, and my father never recovered. He drank away everything we had, every opportunity, every relationship. By the end, I was caring for him more than he ever cared for me." The bitterness in her voice surprised her. She rarely spoke about her father, finding it easier to pretend that part of her life had never existed. Nathan reached across the table and placed his hand over hers, a gesture that was both unexpected and comforting. His palm was warm and rough, solid and real. "Then we are both orphans trying to make something of ourselves in a hard world. There is honor in that." Olivia looked down at their joined hands, feeling something shift inside her, like a door she had kept locked suddenly swinging open. "Yes, I suppose we are." They sat like that for several heartbeats, the late afternoon sun streaming through the window and painting golden rectangles on the wooden floor. Outside, the sounds of Paso Robles continued, horses and wagons passing, voices calling greetings, but inside the bakery, time seemed to slow, creating a bubble of quiet intimacy around two people who had been alone for far too long. Nathan finally pulled his hand back, though he seemed reluctant to break the contact. "I should go. I have a long ride back to the ranch." "Will you come again?" Olivia asked, then immediately worried she sounded too eager, too forward. But Nathan smiled, a real smile that transformed his entire face, making him look years younger. "Yes, if you do not mind the company of a dusty rancher, I would like that very much." "I do not mind at all." Olivia stood as he did, walking him to the door. "Perhaps next time you could tell me more about your dairy operation. I am always looking for reliable suppliers, and your milk is the finest I have ever used. I can do better than tell you about it. Would you like to visit the ranch again? I could show you around properly, explain the whole process. It might be useful for your business." He paused at the door, hat in hand. "And I confess I would enjoy the company." "I would love that," Olivia said, meaning it completely. "When would be convenient this Sunday?" "I could send a wagon for you in the morning, and we could make a day of it. I would have you back before dark." "Sunday would be perfect." Nathan nodded, placed his hat on his head, and stepped out into the street. Olivia watched him walk to where his horse was tied, mount up, and ride north toward his ranch. She stood in the doorway until he disappeared from view, her heart beating faster than it had in months, maybe years. The next few days passed in a blur of anticipation and nervous energy. Olivia found herself taking extra care with her appearance, washing her hair with the expensive lavender soap she usually saved for special occasions, pressing her best day dress, a soft yellow cotton with small white flowers embroidered along the collar and cuffs. She told herself she was being foolish, that this was merely a business arrangement, but her racing pulse betrayed the lie. Sunday morning arrived bright and clear. Olivia was ready an hour before Nathan's wagon appeared, driven by a young Mexican ranch hand who introduced himself as Miguel. He was cheerful and polite, helping her into the wagon with a courteous hand and making pleasant conversation during the ride north. "Senor Peterson is a good man," Miguel said as they rolled along the familiar road. "Fair, honest, works harder than any of us, but he is lonely, I think. It is good that he has found a friend." Olivia felt her cheeks warm at the implication. "We hardly know each other." Miguel grinned. "Sometimes the heart knows before the head catches up. My grandmother always said that." When they arrived at the ranch, Nathan was waiting on the porch, dressed in clean work clothes that somehow looked better than many men's Sunday finest. He helped Olivia down from the wagon personally, his hand strong and steady on her waist, lingering perhaps a moment longer than strictly necessary. "Thank you for coming," he said, and the genuine pleasure in his voice made Olivia's earlier nerves settle into something warmer, more comfortable. "Thank you for inviting me. I have been curious about how you run such a successful operation." Nathan led her on a comprehensive tour of the ranch, starting with the dairy barn where rows of patient cows waited to be milked. He explained his system, how he had studied the latest techniques from Eastern agricultural colleges, how he maintained strict cleanliness standards that kept his cows healthy and his milk pure. Olivia watched his face as he talked, noting how animated he became when discussing his work, how the guarded expression fell away to reveal genuine passion and pride. They visited the milk house where the fresh product was cooled and stored, the calf barn where the youngest animals were kept, and the pastures where the herd grazed on carefully managed grass. Nathan introduced her to several of his workers, all of whom treated him with obvious respect and affection. Whatever loneliness he carried, it did not stem from being cruel or distant with his employees. "You have built something remarkable here," Olivia said as they walked between the fenced fields. The afternoon had grown warm, and she had to shade her eyes against the bright sun. "How long have you owned the ranch?" "I bought the land 8 years ago, right after I mustered out of the army. I had saved my pay and a small inheritance from my parents. It was not much, just enough for 50 acres and a dozen cows, but I had a vision of what it could become." He looked out over his property with something like wonder, as if he still could not quite believe it was real. "Now I have 300 acres and over 100 head of cattle. It has grown beyond anything I imagined. You should be proud. This represents years of hard work and sacrifice." Nathan turned to look at her, his expression serious. "It also represents years of being alone, of choosing work over everything else. I told myself it was necessary, that I could not afford distractions, but lately I have begun to wonder if I made the wrong choice." "What changed?" Olivia asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. "You came to my ranch asking for milk." He said it simply, honestly. "And for the first time in years, I looked forward to coming to town, to talking with someone who understood what it means to build something from nothing. I realized how empty my life had become." They had stopped walking, standing now in the shade of a massive oak tree that must have been 100 years old. Olivia's heart pounded as Nathan stepped closer, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his blue-gray eyes. "Nathan, I barely know you," she said, but there was no conviction in her words. "Then let us change that. Let me know you, Olivia Lawson. Let me learn what makes you laugh, what keeps you awake at night, what dreams you carry in your heart. Give me that chance." She looked up at him, at this serious, lonely man who had somehow found the courage to be vulnerable with her, and felt her carefully constructed walls crumbling. "I dream of having a real home," she whispered. "Not just a place to live, but somewhere I belong, somewhere I am wanted for more than just what I can provide. My whole life, I have been alone, taking care of others, making myself useful so nobody would abandon me. But I dream of being loved just for being myself, not for my baking or my usefulness." Nathan reached up and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch feather-light. "You deserve that. You deserve someone who sees your value beyond what you can do for them. You see that in me." She had to ask, had to know if this connection was real or just another illusion. "Yes." His voice was firm, certain. "From the moment you climbed down from your wagon, dusty and determined, I saw a woman of strength and purpose. You have built something beautiful with your bakery, but more than that, you have built yourself into someone remarkable. I would be honored if you would allow me to know you better." Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes, unexpected and overwhelming. Nobody had ever spoken to her like this, with such raw honesty and respect. "I would like that very much." Nathan smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his face, and offered his arm. "Then let me show you the house. I promise it is more comfortable than the barns." The house was indeed comfortable, surprisingly so for a bachelor's home. It was clean and well organized, with solid furniture and nice details like curtains on the windows and rugs on the floors. Nathan explained that a woman from town came twice a month to help with the heavy cleaning, and he managed the day-to-day maintenance himself. "I am not much of a cook, though," he admitted as he led her into the spacious kitchen. "I mostly live on beef, beans, and whatever bread I can buy in town. It is functional but not particularly exciting." "I could teach you to bake," Olivia offered. "If you wanted to learn." Nathan's eyes lit up. "I would like that, though I warn you I have no natural talent in the kitchen. Everyone can learn the basics, it just takes patience and practice." They spent the rest of the afternoon in the kitchen, Olivia teaching Nathan how to make a simple bread. He proved to be an attentive student, following her instructions carefully, though his large hands struggled with the delicate kneading motion. They laughed together when his first attempt yielded a lump of dough that looked more like a rock than bread, and Olivia gently corrected his technique, standing close to guide his hands through the proper motion. Being near him felt natural, comfortable in a way that surprised her. Nathan smelled like soap and sunshine, clean and honest, and the warmth of his body next to hers created a pleasant flutter in her stomach. When his hands finally mastered the rhythm of kneading, Olivia stepped back, both pleased and disappointed to lose the closeness. "There, you have it now," she said, watching him work the dough with growing confidence. "I have a good teacher." Nathan glanced at her, his eyes soft with affection that sent warmth flooding through her chest. They set the dough to rise and moved to the front porch, where Nathan had set up chairs overlooking the valley. The view was spectacular, rolling hills dotted with oaks stretching toward distant mountains, the whole landscape painted in late afternoon gold. "I could sit here forever," Olivia said, settling into her chair with a contented sigh. "You are welcome here anytime," Nathan replied. "This porch has been lonely for too long. It deserves to hear laughter again." They talked as the sun descended, sharing stories of their childhoods, their hopes, their fears. Olivia learned that Nathan had fought in the last years of the war, that he had seen things that still haunted him in quiet moments, that his parents had died in a fire while he was away, leaving him with guilt that he had not been there to save them. She understood then where his loneliness came from, the deep well of loss that he had tried to fill with work and isolation. In turn, she told him about her father's decline, about the shame she had carried being the daughter of the town drunk, about the relief and guilt she felt when he finally died. Nathan listened without judgment, his presence steady and accepting, making it safe for her to speak truths she had never shared with anyone. When Miguel returned to drive her home as the last light faded from the sky, Olivia felt both reluctant to leave and grateful for the day they had shared. Nathan walked her to the wagon, and before Miguel could climb into the driver's seat, Nathan reached for Olivia's hand. "May I call on you properly?" he asked, his voice formal but his eyes vulnerable. "I know we have done this somewhat backward, but I would like to court you in the traditional manner if you would accept." Olivia's heart swelled with joy. "I would be honored, Nathan." He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles, a gesture that was both old-fashioned and deeply romantic. "Then I will see you soon, Miss Lawson." The ride back to town passed in a happy daze. Miguel chatted about various ranch matters, but Olivia barely heard him, her thoughts consumed by the remarkable man she had spent the day with, by the possibilities unfolding before her like a flower opening to the sun. Over the following weeks, Nathan courted her with quiet determination. He came to town twice a week, always timing his visits to coincide with the slower afternoon hours when Olivia could step away from her work. They took walks along the creek that ran north of Paso Robles. They shared meals at the small restaurant near the livery stable, and they talked endlessly about everything and nothing. The townspeople noticed, of course. In a community as small as Paso Robles, romance was prime material for gossip, but the talk was mostly kind. People seemed pleased that the reclusive rancher had finally found someone, and they approved of Olivia, who had proven herself a valuable addition to their community. Mrs. Chen stopped Olivia one morning at the general store, her face bright with knowing. "That Peterson boy is sweet on you. I see the way he looks at you, like you are water and he has been crossing the desert for years." Olivia felt her cheeks warm but could not suppress her smile. "He is a good man." "A lonely man who has finally found someone worth coming out of hiding for," Mrs. Chen corrected. "Do not make him wait too long, dear. Life is too short to waste when you find something real." The old woman's words echoed in Olivia's mind as she walked back to her bakery. Was this real? Could she trust these feelings that grew stronger every time she saw Nathan? She had been alone so long, had learned to rely only on herself, but with Nathan, she felt the possibility of something more, something she had stopped believing existed. That evening, Nathan surprised her by arriving with a bouquet of wildflowers he had picked from his property. They were simple but beautiful, a mix of golden poppies, purple lupines, and white yarrow tied with a plain string. "I am not much of a romantic," he said, looking slightly embarrassed as he handed them to her. "But these grow all over the ranch and they reminded me of you, bright and resilient, thriving despite harsh conditions." Olivia accepted the flowers with tears in her eyes. "They are perfect, Nathan." "Thank you." They sat together on the small bench outside her bakery, watching the evening settle over Paso Robles as people finished their daily business and headed home. Nathan reached over and took her hand, intertwining their fingers in a gesture that had become familiar and precious. "Olivia, I need to tell you something," he said, his voice serious. "I have not been entirely forthcoming about my past, and you deserve to know the whole truth before this goes any further." Olivia's heart clenched with sudden fear. "What is it?" Nathan took a deep breath. When I came back from the war, I was not in a good place. I drank heavily, got into fights, nearly destroyed myself with anger and grief. I blamed the world for taking my parents, for making me kill other men, for all the senseless waste and pain. It took hitting rock bottom, waking up in a jail cell after a bar fight that nearly killed another man, for me to realize I needed to change. He paused, looking down at their joined hands. The sheriff at the time, a man named Robert Greene, gave me a choice. I could go to prison, or I could leave town, get sober, and make something of myself. He loaned me money for the land, made me promise to pay him back with interest, and told me not to come back until I was someone worth being. How long did that take? Olivia asked softly. 5 years. 5 years of backbreaking work, of fighting the urge to drink every single day, of slowly rebuilding myself into someone I could respect. When I had saved enough money, I paid back Sheriff Greene with interest, and he told me I was welcome in Paso Robles again. But by then I had grown used to being alone. It felt safer than risking another fall. Olivia squeezed his hand. Thank you for telling me. I know that took courage. Nathan looked at her, his eyes searching her face. You do not think less of me. You are not afraid of what I was. No. Olivia said it firmly, certainly. I am proud of what you became. You faced your demons and won. That takes more strength than most people ever manage. My father could not do it. He let his pain destroy him and everyone around him. But you chose differently. You chose to survive, to build something meaningful. How could I think less of you for that? The relief in Nathan's expression was palpable. He lifted their joined hands and pressed his forehead against her knuckles, a gesture of such vulnerability and trust that Olivia felt her heart crack open completely. I love you, he whispered. I know it is too soon. I know I should wait, but I cannot hold it in any longer. I love you, Olivia Lawson. You have brought light back into my life, and I cannot imagine going back to the darkness. Tears streamed down Olivia's cheeks, but they were tears of joy, of relief, of coming home. I love you too, Nathan. I did not think I could feel this way about anyone, but you have shown me what it means to be truly seen and valued. I love you. He pulled her into his arms then, holding her close as the last light faded from the western sky. Olivia rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, feeling safer and more cherished than she had ever felt in her entire life. Marry me, Nathan said into her hair. I know we have only known each other a few weeks, but I am certain. I have never been more certain of anything in my life. Marry me, Olivia. Let me spend every day proving that you made the right choice. Olivia pulled back to look up at him, seeing the raw hope and fear in his eyes, the terrible vulnerability of laying his heart completely bare. Yes, she said, laughing through her tears. Yes, Nathan Peterson, I will marry you. He kissed her then, a kiss that was gentle and reverent, full of promise and possibility. It was Olivia's first real kiss, and it felt like everything she had ever dreamed it could be. Sweet and safe and absolutely right. They spent the next hour making plans, practical and romantic in equal measure. They decided on a simple wedding at the small chapel in town, with just a few close friends as witnesses. Nathan suggested Olivia move into the ranch house after the ceremony, but she worried about her bakery, about abandoning the business she had worked so hard to build. What if we expanded the bakery? Nathan proposed. I could fund the improvements, make it larger so you could hire help. That way you could continue your work but have more freedom, more time for other things. For us. That would be wonderful, Olivia agreed. But I would insist on paying you back, just like you paid back Sheriff Greene. I want to contribute equally to our partnership. Nathan smiled. Equal partners in all things. I like the sound of that. They were married 3 weeks later on a Sunday morning in late August. The chapel was small but filled with goodwill, with Mrs. Chen and her family, Miguel and several ranch hands, Sheriff Green, who had heard about the wedding and came to stand witness to Nathan's happiness, and a dozen regular customers from Olivia's bakery, who had grown fond of the determined young woman with the incredible pastries. Olivia wore a simple white dress she had sewn herself, with lace borrowed from Mrs. Chen and wildflowers in her hair, picked that morning from the ranch. Nathan wore a new suit he had purchased from the tailor, looking handsome and nervous and so full of love that Olivia's heart felt like it might burst. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. As they exchanged vows, promising to love and support each other through whatever life might bring, Olivia thought about the long journey that had brought her to this moment. All the pain, all the loneliness, all the hard work had led her here, to this good man who saw her for who she truly was and loved her anyway. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed her with such tender joy that the small congregation burst into applause. They walked out of the chapel together into the bright California sunshine, ready to begin their life as partners in every sense of the word. The wedding celebration took place at the ranch, with tables set up under the oak trees and food prepared by several women from town who insisted on contributing to the festivities. There was music from a fiddler Nathan had hired, and dancing, and laughter that rang across the valley like bells. Late in the afternoon, as Olivia stood watching the celebration with Nathan's arm around her waist, Sheriff Green approached them. He was an older man now, his hair mostly gray, but his eyes were sharp and kind. "I wanted to tell you both how happy I am to see this day," he said. "Nathan, when I gave you that chance all those years ago, I was not sure you would make it, but you proved me wrong in the best possible way. You have become exactly the kind of man I hoped you could be." Nathan shook the sheriff's hand with obvious emotion. "I owe you everything, Robert. Without your faith in me, I would have rotted in prison or destroyed myself completely. No, you did this yourself. I just opened a door. You had the courage to walk through it." The sheriff turned to Olivia. "And you, young lady, take care of this stubborn fool. He needs someone to remind him that life is about more than just work." "I will," Olivia promised. "We will take care of each other." As the sun set on their wedding day, Olivia and Nathan stood on the porch of their home, watching their guests depart, waving goodbye to friends and well-wishers. When the last wagon rolled down the drive, they were finally alone, husband and wife, facing a future full of promise. "Are you tired?" Nathan asked, pulling her close. "No, I am happy." Olivia rested her head on his shoulder. "Happier than I ever thought possible. Good. Because I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you stay that way." That night, they began their life together in earnest, learning each other in the privacy of their bedroom, discovering the joy and intimacy of physical love. Nathan was gentle and patient, attuned to Olivia's inexperience, making sure she felt safe and cherished. Olivia found courage in his tenderness, responding to his touch with a passion that surprised them both. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the moonlight streaming through the bedroom window, talking and laughing and making plans for their future. It felt like the world had narrowed to just the two of them, like nothing existed beyond this room, this bed, this perfect moment of connection. The weeks that followed were a period of adjustment and joy. Olivia divided her time between the bakery and the ranch, learning to balance her business with her new role as a wife. Nathan had been true to his word about expanding the bakery, and within a month, she had hired a young woman named Sarah to help with the daily baking, giving Olivia more flexibility in her schedule. The ranch became her true home, though. She loved waking up next to Nathan, watching the sunrise paint the valley in shades of gold and pink while he held her close. She loved learning about the dairy operation, helping when she could, understanding the rhythms and cycles that governed their life. She loved the quiet evenings on the porch, the conversations that ranged from practical matters to philosophical debates, the comfortable silences that spoke of deep understanding. Nathan, for his part, seemed transformed by marriage. The guarded, lonely man who had first opened his door to a desperate baker had become someone more open, more willing to laugh, more engaged with the world. He started attending church on Sundays, joining Olivia in town for community events, slowly rebuilding connections he had severed years ago. By October, Olivia realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks but waited to be certain before telling Nathan. When she finally shared the news one evening after dinner, his reaction was everything she had hoped for: a baby. His face cycled through shock, wonder, and pure joy in the space of seconds. "We are going to have a baby. Yes, probably sometime in early June if my calculations are right." Olivia watched him process the information, saw the moment when the reality fully hit him. Nathan pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for giving me a family again, for making this house a home. I promise I will be a good father. I will give our child everything I never had." "You will be an amazing father," Olivia assured him. "I have no doubts about that." The pregnancy was not easy. Olivia suffered from terrible nausea in the first few months, barely able to work at the bakery, relying heavily on Sarah to maintain the daily operations. Nathan was attentive and worried, hovering over her like a nervous hen, which Olivia found both endearing and occasionally frustrating. "I am pregnant, not dying," she told him one afternoon when he tried to stop her from kneading bread. "Women have been doing this for thousands of years while working much harder than I am." "But those women were not carrying my child," Nathan countered. "Please, let me worry, it makes me feel useful." Olivia softened at his concern. "Fine, you can worry, but I still need to work. It keeps me sane." They compromised, with Olivia cutting back her hours but maintaining enough involvement to feel productive. As her pregnancy progressed and her nausea faded, she began to enjoy the changes in her body, the growing swell of her belly, the flutter of movement that signaled life growing inside her. Winter came to the California Valley, bringing cooler temperatures and occasional rain. The ranch slowed its operations somewhat during these months, giving Nathan more time at home, more opportunities to fuss over Olivia and prepare for the baby's arrival. He converted one of the spare bedrooms into a nursery, building a cradle by hand with wood from an oak tree on the property. Olivia sewed blankets and tiny clothes, marveling at how small they were, how perfect. "What should we name the baby?" Nathan asked one evening as they sat by the fire, Olivia's feet propped on his lap as he rubbed them gently. "I have been thinking about that. If it is a boy, I would like to name him after your father." "What was his name?" Nathan's eyes grew misty. Thomas Peterson." "He was a good man, strong and fair. I would be honored to have a son named after him." "And if it is a girl," Olivia prompted, "then I think we should name her after your mother." "What was her name?" "Margaret, but everyone called her Maggie." Olivia felt tears sting her eyes, touched by Nathan's thoughtfulness. "She would have loved you, I think. She always wanted me to find someone who saw my value." "Then Maggie it is if we have a daughter." Nathan leaned forward and kissed her swollen belly. "Did you hear that, little one? We are arguing about your name before we even know who you are." The baby kicked in response, and they both laughed, delighted by this evidence of life and personality already forming. Spring arrived with an explosion of wildflowers covering the hills surrounding the ranch. Olivia's belly had grown large and unwieldy, making sleep difficult and movement awkward, but she remained in good health and high spirits. The bakery was thriving under Sarah's management, with Olivia making occasional appearances to create special orders and maintain relationships with her regular customers. On a warm evening in early June, 3 weeks before the baby was expected, Olivia's water broke while she was helping Nathan with dinner preparations. They stared at each other in momentary panic before Nathan sprang into action, helping her to the bedroom and sending Miguel racing to town to fetch the midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Peterson, who had delivered most of the babies in Paso Robles for the past 20 years. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Nathan stayed by Olivia's side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, offering encouragement and love when the pain became almost unbearable. Mrs. Peterson was patient and professional, guiding Olivia through each contraction, each push, until finally, as the afternoon sun streamed through the bedroom window, a baby's cry filled the air. "It is a boy," Mrs. Peterson announced, placing the squalling infant on Olivia's chest. A big, healthy boy with excellent lungs. Olivia looked down at her son through tears of exhaustion and joy, marveling at his tiny, perfect features, his shock of dark hair, his strong, angry cry that announced his arrival to the world. Nathan stood beside the bed, staring at his child with an expression of such profound awe and love that Olivia fell in love with him all over again. "Thomas," she whispered. "Our Thomas." Nathan reached out with a shaking hand to touch his son's tiny fist, and the baby immediately grasped his father's finger with surprising strength. "Hello, Thomas Peterson," Nathan said, his voice breaking with emotion. "Welcome to the world, son. Your mother and I have been waiting so long to meet you." The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights, endless feedings, and the overwhelming responsibility of caring for a newborn. But they were also filled with moments of pure magic. The first smile that was probably just gas but felt like a gift. The soft weight of the baby sleeping on Olivia's chest. The sight of Nathan rocking his son in the handmade cradle, singing old songs in a soft voice. Olivia healed slowly from the birth, grateful for Nathan's help and support, for the way he took on extra duties without complaint, for the tenderness he showed both her and their son. She watched him become a father and felt her love deepen into something even more profound than the romantic passion they had shared. By the time Thomas was 3 months old, Olivia had recovered enough to return to the bakery part-time. She brought the baby with her, setting up a small cradle in the back room where he could sleep while she worked. The customers loved seeing him, cooing over his chubby cheeks and bright eyes, and Olivia discovered a new kind of satisfaction in balancing motherhood with her professional ambitions. As autumn painted the valley in shades of gold and rust, Olivia and Nathan celebrated their first wedding anniversary with a quiet dinner on the porch, Thomas sleeping peacefully in his cradle nearby. They reflected on how much their lives had changed in just 1 year, how they had gone from lonely individuals to a family, from isolation to profound connection. "I cannot imagine my life without you," Nathan said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "Everything good in my world exists because you had the courage to ask a stranger for milk." Olivia laughed. "I was desperate, not courageous, but I am grateful that desperation led me to you. You ever regret it? Giving up your independence, taking on a husband and child, tying yourself to this ranch? Never." Olivia said it firmly, without hesitation. "I thought independence meant being alone, supporting myself, needing nobody. But I have learned that true independence is choosing who you commit to, building a partnership based on mutual respect and love. I am more myself with you than I ever was alone. Nathan stood and came around the table, pulling her into his arms. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Olivia Peterson. I love you more every day. They stood holding each other as the sun set over the valley they both loved, their son sleeping peacefully nearby, the future stretching before them full of possibility and promise. The years that followed brought both challenges and joys. The ranch continued to prosper, growing to include beef cattle alongside the dairy operation, expanding their income and influence in the region. The bakery became a cornerstone of Paso Robles, with Olivia's reputation spreading to neighboring towns and bringing in customers from miles around. Thomas grew into a bright, energetic boy with his father's blue-gray eyes and his mother's warm smile. When he was 2 years old, Olivia gave birth to a daughter they named Maggie, fulfilling the promise they had made before Thomas was born. Maggie had her mother's light brown hair and her father's serious demeanor, a thoughtful child who preferred observing to participating in her brother's more boisterous games. Nathan proved to be an exceptional father, patient and engaged, teaching his children about the ranch, about responsibility, about treating all people with dignity regardless of their station. Olivia watched him play with Thomas and Maggie on the floor of their living room, building elaborate structures from wooden blocks, telling silly stories that made them giggle, and felt gratitude wash over her in waves. When Thomas was 4 and Maggie was 2, Olivia discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first 2, and in the spring of 1888 she gave birth to another son, whom they named William after Nathan's grandfather. William was a calm, happy baby who rarely cried, content to watch the world with wide, curious eyes. The house that had once been too big and too quiet for one lonely man now rang with the sounds of family, of children laughing and arguing and learning, of parents teaching and loving, and sometimes losing their tempers before apologizing and making things right. It was messy and chaotic and absolutely perfect. Olivia continued to work at the bakery, though her hours became more flexible as her family grew. Sarah had become a partner in the business, taking on more responsibility and ownership, allowing Olivia to focus on the creative aspects she loved most, developing new recipes, creating special occasion cakes, teaching occasional baking classes for women in the community. Nathan remained deeply involved in ranch management, but made sure to carve out time for his family, for dinners together around the big kitchen table, for Sunday picnics by the creek, for bedtime stories and prayers before tucking the children into their beds. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Nathan surprised Olivia with a trip to San Francisco, their first real vacation since marrying. They left the children with Mrs. Chen, who had become like a grandmother to Thomas, Maggie, and William, and spent 3 days exploring the city, visiting restaurants and shops, walking along the waterfront, staying in a beautiful hotel that felt impossibly luxurious. On their last evening in the city, as they sat in a fancy restaurant overlooking the bay, Nathan pulled a small box from his pocket and slid it across the table. "What is this?" Olivia asked, opening it to find a delicate gold bracelet with tiny charms, one for each member of their family. "A reminder," Nathan said, "of how far we have come, of the family we have built together. I wanted you to have something beautiful that represents our life." Tears filled Olivia's eyes as she clasped the bracelet around her wrist, admiring how it caught the candlelight. "It is perfect, Nathan. Just like us. We are far from perfect," he laughed. "But we are real and we are ours, and that is enough." They returned to Paso Robles renewed and reconnected, ready to face whatever came next with the strength they drew from each other. As the children grew older, they began to show distinct personalities and interests. Thomas was fascinated by the ranch animals, spending every possible moment in the barns, learning from his father and the ranch hands. By the time he was 8, he could milk a cow as efficiently as any adult, and he showed a natural gift for animal husbandry that made Nathan proud. Maggie, on the other hand, was drawn to her mother's world. She loved the bakery, loved learning to measure and mix, loved the alchemy of turning simple ingredients into something delicious and beautiful. By age 6, she could make a basic bread dough, and her favorite afternoons were spent standing on a stool at her mother's work table, carefully decorating cookies with icing and sprinkles. William was still young, but he showed signs of being the scholar of the family, always asking questions, always curious about how things worked. Olivia had started teaching him letters and numbers, and he absorbed everything like a sponge, already reading simple words at age 3. One evening in the fall of 1890, as Olivia and Nathan sat on their porch watching the children play in the yard under Miguel's watchful supervision, Nathan turned to his wife with a serious expression. "I have been thinking about expanding again," he said. "There is a property adjacent to ours, about 100 acres, that is going up for sale. If we bought it, we could nearly double the size of the ranch, secure our children's future even more." Olivia considered this. "Can we afford it?" "Yes, though it would require taking on some debt." "I have been talking with the bank, and they are willing to extend us a loan based on the ranch's performance over the past few years." He paused. "But I will not do it unless you agree. This is our decision to make together." This was typical of Nathan, always treating their marriage as a true partnership, never making major decisions without Olivia's input and agreement. "What does your instinct tell you?" "That it is a good investment, that we should think not just about ourselves but about Thomas, Maggie, and William. This would give them options, security, the chance to build their own lives on a solid foundation." Olivia nodded slowly. "Then I think we should do it. We have worked too hard to play it safe now. Let us bet on ourselves and our children." Nathan leaned over and kissed her softly. "Have I mentioned lately how grateful I am that you are my partner in all things?" "You mention it regularly," Olivia replied with a smile. "But I never get tired of hearing it." They purchased the additional land, and for the next several years worked harder than ever to develop it and integrate it into their operation. The ranch hands expanded to include more workers, and Nathan began training Thomas to take on real responsibilities, teaching him not just the practical skills of ranching, but the business acumen needed to manage a successful operation. Olivia, meanwhile, opened a second location for the bakery in a neighboring town, with Sarah managing the Paso Robles shop, and a new young woman named Emma running the second location. The success was gratifying but also exhausting, and there were times when Olivia wondered if they had taken on too much. But Nathan was always there to support her, to remind her that they were building something bigger than themselves, and that the temporary sacrifice would yield long-term rewards. And he was right. By the time Thomas turned 12 in 1894, the expanded ranch was thriving, producing more milk and beef than ever, earning a reputation as one of the finest operations in Central California. As their children entered adolescence, new challenges emerged. Thomas became more independent, sometimes chafing against his father's authority, testing boundaries in ways that frustrated and worried Nathan. Maggie developed a stubborn streak that manifested in creative ways, like when she decided to redesign all the bakery's packaging without asking permission first, causing a week of chaos, until they admitted her designs were actually better than the originals. William, now 6 years old, revealed a sensitive nature that made him prone to tears and worry. Olivia spent many evenings soothing his anxieties, helping him understand that feeling deeply was not weakness but strength, that his emotional intelligence would serve him well throughout life. Through it all, Olivia and Nathan maintained their partnership, their commitment to facing challenges together rather than allowing them to drive them apart. They still made time for each other, still found moments to connect beyond their roles as parents and business partners, still looked at each other with love and desire even after years of marriage. One night, after a particularly difficult day where Thomas had gotten into trouble at school for fighting, and Maggie had thrown a tantrum about wanting to quit piano lessons, Olivia collapsed into bed with a heavy sigh. "Some days I wonder if we have any idea what we are doing," she said to Nathan, who was already under the covers beside her. "We definitely do not," he agreed. "We are making it up as we go along, just like everyone else. But what if we are making terrible mistakes? What if we are ruining them somehow?" Nathan rolled onto his side to face her, his expression gentle. "Olivia, look at what we have given them. A stable home, love, opportunities, values, and the knowledge that they are cherished unconditionally. That is more than most children get. We will make mistakes, certainly, but our children will never doubt that they are loved. That is what matters most." Olivia felt the tension drain from her body. "You always know the right thing to say." "No, I just have practice reminding you of things you already know but sometimes forget when you are tired." He pulled her close, wrapping her in his arms. "We are good parents, my love. Not perfect, but good, and that is enough." The turn of the century brought both change and continuity to the Peterson family. Thomas, now 18 and grown into a tall, capable young man, had become his father's right hand on the ranch, managing entire sections of the operation with confidence and skill. He talked about attending an agricultural college back east to learn the latest techniques, and while Nathan hated the idea of his son being so far away, he supported the ambition. Maggie, at 16, had become an accomplished baker and businesswoman, with ideas for expanding the bakery into a wholesale operation that would supply restaurants and hotels throughout California. Her energy and vision sometimes exhausted Olivia, but she was proud of her daughter's ambition and intelligence. William, at 12, had indeed proven to be the scholar of the family. He devoured every book he could get his hands on, showing particular interest in medicine and science. The schoolteacher in Paso Robles had told Nathan and Olivia that their youngest son had the potential to attend university if he wished, perhaps even become a doctor or scientist. On New Year's Day of 1900, the entire Peterson family gathered on the porch to watch the sunrise on the new century. Olivia, now 36 years old, looked around at her family, at the life she had built with Nathan, and felt overwhelming gratitude. "What are you thinking?" Nathan asked, slipping his arm around her waist. At 38, he was still handsome and strong, though his hair now showed threads of silver at the temples. "I am thinking about a desperate woman who needed milk for a wedding cake," Olivia replied, "and how that simple need led to everything that matters in my life." Nathan smiled. "I am thinking about a lonely man who almost did not answer his door that day, who almost let fear and old wounds rob him of the greatest gift he could receive." They stood together watching the sun paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, their children around them, the ranch they had built together stretching across the valley below. It had been 18 years since Olivia first rode up that long drive with her heart full of worry and her wagon empty of milk. 18 years since Nathan had looked at a dusty, determined woman and seen possibility, instead of intrusion. Thomas left for college that fall, a departure that was harder on Nathan than he wanted to admit. But he wrote home regularly, sharing his excitement about new agricultural techniques he was learning, and during his first Christmas break, he returned full of ideas for improving the ranch. Maggie took over more responsibility at the bakery, eventually buying out Sarah's share when the older woman decided to retire. At 20, she was a formidable businesswoman, respected by suppliers and customers alike, known for her fair dealing and innovative approach. William received a scholarship to attend university in San Francisco, where he pursued his interest in medicine with single-minded determination. Olivia worried about her sensitive son in the big city, but William thrived in the academic environment, writing home about his classes and the amazing discoveries being made in medical science. As their children launched into adulthood, Olivia and Nathan found themselves with more time alone together, rediscovering the companionship and romance that had first brought them together. They took more trips, explored California's diverse landscape, and enjoyed the luxury of spontaneous decisions now that they were not constantly juggling the demands of young children. One evening, as they celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary with a quiet dinner at home, Nathan raised his glass in a toast. To the woman who knocked on my door asking for milk and ended up giving me a life beyond my wildest dreams. To 20 years of partnership, love, and adventure. And to however many more years God grants us together. Olivia clinked her glass against his, her eyes shining with tears. To the rancher who gave me milk and his devoted heart, to the family we built together, to the love that has sustained us through every challenge and triumph. They drank, and then Nathan stood and offered his hand. Dance with me. There was no music, just the sound of crickets chirping in the summer night, but Olivia took his hand and let him pull her into his arms. They swayed together on their porch, the same porch where they had shared so many moments over the years, and Olivia rested her head on Nathan's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I love you," she whispered. "More than I did 20 years ago, which I would not have thought possible." "I love you too," Nathan replied. "You are my home, Olivia. Everything good in my life flows from you." They continued to dance as the stars emerged overhead. Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built something lasting and real from nothing more than need and hope, and the courage to trust in love. The years continued their steady march. Thomas returned to the ranch after completing his education, bringing with him a wife named Catherine, a sweet-tempered woman from a farming family in Iowa whom he had met at college. They settled into one of the houses Nathan had built on the expanded property, and within a year, they presented Olivia and Nathan with their first grandchild, a boy named Daniel. Holding her grandson for the first time, Olivia was transported back to the day Thomas was born, to the overwhelming rush of love and responsibility. But this time, there was an added layer of joy in watching her own son become a father, in seeing the cycle continue. Nathan was equally besotted with his grandson, spending hours rocking the baby and telling him stories about the ranch, about his father's childhood, about the great-grandparents the boy would never meet, but whose legacy lived on in the family they had created. Maggie married at 24, choosing a young lawyer from San Luis Obispo named Richard who appreciated her drive and intelligence. They split their time between managing the bakery empire, which now included 5 locations across Central California, and Richard's growing law practice. They had twin girls, Emma and Julia, who inherited their mother's determination, and their father's quick wit. William completed medical school and opened a practice in San Francisco, specializing in children's medicine. He married a fellow doctor, a brilliant woman named Sarah who shared his passion for healing. They had one daughter, Margaret, named after Olivia's mother, a serious child who seemed destined to follow in her parents' intellectual footsteps. As Olivia and Nathan entered their 50s, they found themselves surrounded by grandchildren, by the fruit of the love they had planted decades earlier. The ranch continued to thrive under Thomas's management, incorporating new technologies and techniques while maintaining the high standards Nathan had always insisted upon. Olivia had stepped back from daily involvement in the bakery, content to let Maggie run the business while she focused on developing new recipes and writing a cookbook that was eventually published to modest success. She enjoyed being a grandmother, having the freedom to spoil the children and then hand them back to their parents when they became difficult. One afternoon in the spring of 1912, as Olivia was baking cookies with her granddaughters Emma and Julia, now 8 years old and visiting for the week, Nathan came into the kitchen looking more serious than usual. "Olivia, could I speak with you for a moment?" She wiped her hands on her apron and stepped out onto the porch with him, concerned by his tone. "What is wrong?" Nathan took her hand, his grip firm but trembling slightly. "I saw the doctor in town today. I have been having some pain in my chest, and I wanted to make sure it was nothing serious." Olivia's heart clenched with sudden fear. "What did he say?" "My heart is weak. He says I need to take it easy, reduce my stress, let Thomas handle more of the ranch operations." Nathan looked out over the valley, his expression stoic but scared. "He says if I am careful, I could have many more years. But if I continue at my current pace, pushing myself too hard, it could give out at any time." Tears sprang to Olivia's eyes. "Then you will take it easy. You will let Thomas run things." "Nathan, we have worked too hard and built too much together for you to risk your health now. I know. I just hate feeling useless, being forced to slow down." "You are not useless. You are a husband, father, and grandfather who has earned the right to rest, to enjoy what we have built rather than constantly striving for more." Olivia gripped both his hands tightly. "Promise me you will follow the doctor's orders. Promise me you will not leave me after all these years." Nathan pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "I promise. I am not ready to leave you either, my love. We still have too much living to do together." He kept his promise. Nathan stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch, content to advise Thomas when asked, but letting his son make the major decisions. It was harder than he expected, ceding control of something he had built from nothing, but with Olivia's support and encouragement, he learned to find satisfaction in a quieter life. They spent their days gardening, reading, taking slow walks around the property and spending time with their grandchildren. Nathan taught Daniel, now 12 years old, about the history of the ranch, about where they had started and how far they had come. He told the boy stories about his early days with Olivia, about the struggles and triumphs that had shaped their family. On their 30th wedding anniversary in 1912, their entire family gathered at the ranch for a massive celebration. All 3 children were there with their spouses and children, creating a boisterous crowd of 15 people, including Olivia and Nathan. They set up long tables under the oak trees, the same trees that had witnessed so many important moments in their life together. As the sun began to set and the children ran wild through the fields, Thomas stood and raised his glass. "I want to say something about my parents," he began, his voice carrying across the gathering. "When I was growing up, I thought every family was like ours, that every father was as patient and hardworking as mine, that every mother was as loving and capable as mine. But as I have grown older and built my own family, I have come to realize how rare what they have is, how special. He looked at Nathan and Olivia, his eyes suspiciously bright. "You gave us more than a comfortable life and good education. You gave us an example of what real love looks like, of what partnership and commitment mean. You showed us that people can overcome terrible pasts, can build something beautiful from nothing, can choose every day to honor the promises they made." Maggie stood next, adding her own words. "Mother, you taught me that a woman can be both strong and feminine, both ambitious and nurturing. You showed me that I do not have to choose between career and family, that I can have both if I am willing to work hard and make smart choices. Father, you taught me that real men respect women's intelligence and capabilities, that strength comes in many forms, and that being vulnerable is not weakness but courage." William was the last of the children to speak. "I am a doctor because you taught me to care about others, to see healing as a calling rather than just a profession. You raised us to treat everyone with dignity, to judge people by their character rather than their circumstances. The world is a better place because of how you raised us, and we hope to pass those same values on to our children." By the time they finished, everyone was crying, including Nathan and Olivia. They stood together, hand in hand, overwhelmed by the legacy they had created, by these remarkable humans they had raised, and the next generation that was already showing signs of carrying forward the family's values. "Thank you," Nathan said simply. "Thank you for being the greatest gift of my life, for making me a father, for giving me a reason to be better than I ever thought I could be." The years continued, bringing both joy and sorrow. Nathan's heart condition remained stable but never improved, and there were occasional scares that sent Olivia's anxiety spiraling. But he defied the doctor's initial pessimistic prognosis, living well into his 60s through a combination of careful living and sheer stubbornness. Olivia herself remained remarkably healthy, her energy and vitality sustained by staying active and engaged with her family and community. She continued to bake, though now mostly for pleasure rather than business, and her kitchen was always open to grandchildren who wanted to learn her recipes. On a golden afternoon in October of 1918, as Olivia and Nathan sat on their beloved porch watching the sunset, Nathan suddenly gasped and clutched his chest. Olivia immediately recognized what was happening and called for help, but even as Thomas and Catherine came running, she knew this was the moment they had been dreading. Nathan's heart attack was massive and swift. He died in Olivia's arms on the porch where they had shared so many moments, his last words a whispered, "I love you," that broke and healed her heart simultaneously. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people. Nathan had touched many lives over his 66 years, had built a reputation as a fair, honest man who treated everyone with respect. But for Olivia, the loss was almost unbearable. They had been married for 36 years, had built an entire life together, and now she faced a future without him. In the months after Nathan's death, Olivia struggled with grief and loneliness. Her children urged her to move in with one of them, but she refused, insisting on staying in the ranch house where she and Nathan had raised their family. The memories here were precious, and she was not ready to leave them behind. Slowly, with the support of her children and grandchildren, Olivia found a way forward. She threw herself into her baking again, creating elaborate cakes and pastries that she donated to church functions and community events. She spent time with her grandchildren, now growing into young adults themselves, passing on family stories and recipes. And every evening, she sat on the porch at sunset, in the chair next to Nathan's empty one, and talked to him. She told him about her day, about the children and grandchildren, about the ranch that Thomas was running with the same dedication Nathan had shown. Sometimes she cried, missing him with an ache that never fully faded, but mostly she felt grateful for the decades they had shared, for the love that had transformed both their lives. 5 years after Nathan's death, Olivia was sitting on the porch when Daniel, now a young man of 23, came to visit. He had graduated from college and was helping his father run the ranch, showing the same natural gift for the work that Nathan had possessed. "Grandma, can I ask you something?" he said, settling into his grandfather's old chair. "Of course, dear. How did you do it? How did you and Grandpa build all of this from nothing? I look at what you accomplished and it seems impossible." Olivia smiled, thinking back to that hot July day in 1882 when she had driven her wagon up the long drive, desperate and hopeful. "We started with milk," she said. "I needed milk for a wedding cake and your grandfather had it, but what we really gave each other was much more valuable. He gave me his devoted heart and I gave him mine. Everything else, the ranch, the bakery, your father and aunt and uncle, all of it grew from that initial exchange." She paused, looking out over the valley painted gold by the setting sun. "Love is not a fairy tale, Daniel. It is work and compromise and choosing each other even when it is hard. But when you find the right person, when you build a partnership based on mutual respect and genuine affection, that work becomes joy. Your grandfather and I faced plenty of challenges, but we faced them together, and that made all the difference." Daniel nodded slowly, absorbing her words. "I want that someday, what you and Grandpa had." "You will find it," Olivia assured him. "Just remember to look beyond the surface." "Your grandfather was the loneliest man I had ever seen when I first met him, but I saw past that to the good man underneath. And he saw past my desperation to the capable woman I was trying to become. We helped each other become our best selves." As Daniel left and twilight settled over the ranch, Olivia remained on the porch, wrapped in a shawl against the evening chill. She was 73 years old now, her hair completely white, her hands marked by age and work, but her spirit remained strong. "We did well, Nathan," she whispered into the gathering darkness. "Our children are happy and successful. Our grandchildren are growing into fine people. The ranch is thriving. And the bakery, the business I started from nothing, now has locations throughout California. We left a legacy, you and I. We built something that will last long after we are both gone." She could almost feel his presence beside her, could almost hear his voice telling her how proud he was, how grateful he remained for the day she had knocked on his door asking for milk. The love they had shared had not ended with his death. It lived on in their children, in the ranch, in the community they had helped build, in the countless small ways their lives had touched others. Olivia lived another 3 years, remaining active and engaged until the very end. When she finally passed away peacefully in her sleep in the spring of 1926, at age 76, she was surrounded by family, her hand held by Maggie on one side and William on the other, Thomas keeping vigil at the foot of her bed. At her funeral, which was even larger than Nathan's had been, people spoke of her kindness, her generosity, her remarkable business acumen, and her devotion to family. But what they remembered most was the love story she had shared with Nathan, a romance that had become legendary in Paso Robles, proof that two broken people could find each other and build something beautiful that would outlast their own lifetimes. They buried her next to Nathan in the cemetery overlooking the valley, under an oak tree very much like the ones on the ranch they had built together. The simple headstone read, "Olivia Peterson, beloved wife, mother and grandmother. She needed milk for her baking. He gave milk and his devoted heart. Together they built a legacy of love." The ranch remained in the Peterson family for generations, always maintaining the high standards Nathan had established and the values he and Olivia had instilled. The bakery, too, continued to thrive, eventually expanding nationwide, though the original location in Paso Robles remained its heart, still using some of Olivia's original recipes. And on warm summer evenings, if you stood on the porch of the old ranch house, you could almost feel their presence. Two souls who had found each other against all odds, who had chosen love over loneliness, partnership over isolation, hope over despair. Their story became part of the land itself, woven into the fabric of the valley, a reminder that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with the simplest needs and the courage to ask for help. The legacy of Olivia and Nathan Peterson was not measured in acres or dollars, though they had accumulated plenty of both. It was measured in the love they had shared, the family they had raised, and the countless lives they had touched through their example of what commitment and devotion could accomplish. They had started with nothing but determination and each other, and from that foundation, they had built an empire of the heart that would endure for generations to come.